Hey guys, tonight we travel far back, deep into the frostbitten past, to explore something most of us have never truly faced, surviving a medieval winter. Picture this. You're wrapped in scratchy wool, your breath fogs in front of you, and the air smells like damp wood smoke and fear. You've got no central heating, no stock grocery store, and if you're lucky, maybe one potato hiding in a root cellar that smells vaguely of despair. The winds are howling, the nights stretch like stories told too long, and, well, let's be honest, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop your location and local time in the comments. I want to know where you're tuning in from, and whether it's as cold as the 14th century where you are. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first snow doesn't drift in gently, it punches you right in the nose. You wake to find the world outside gone gray and white, your breath thick in the air, your toes already numb before you've swung out of bed. And by bed, we mean a straw-stuffed mattress atop wooden planks, shared with your siblings, your fleas, and probably at least one small rodent family you haven't charged rent. You stumble outside, squinting into a sky that seems to have lost interest in the sun. The flakes aren't playful, they're heavy, wet, and relentless. You kick through slush and curse under your breath, hoping your patched leather shoes hold up. They don't. Panic sets in. You weren't ready. No one ever really is. You've spent autumn hoarding root vegetables, smoking meat, drying herbs, and trying to pretend the cold won't last that long this year. It will. You brace a ladder against your cottage wall and check the thatch, some of it sagging, soaked through. You wedge more turf into the gaps, praying it'll hold. Inside, you skin your dwindling supplies. A few turnips, a chunk of salt pork gone a little blue on the edges, a half sack of oats. The apples are soft, shriveled, and smell faintly of regret. You were supposed to dig the storage pit deeper, but your cousin borrowed the spade and never gave it back. Typical Ethelbert. People like to think of winter as restful, a time of pause. But hey, it's a countdown. The firewood you split is already damp and hissing in the hearth. You go outside and stack what's left under cloth torp weighed down with stones. It won't help much, and your neighbor, old Marta, is already hinting she might borrow some if her sons don't return soon. A village crier passes, half shouting, half shivering. First frost arrived 2 weeks early. Blackbirds already vanished. Sign of the times. You're not sure what that means exactly, but it definitely sounds bad. Fun fact, in some parts of medieval Europe, people actually tried to predict the winter by observing pig spleens. Apparently, the way it curved or puckered told you how many cold snaps to expect. Historians still argue whether that's reliable meteorology or just an early form of seasonal anxiety. You think about the other things you should have done. Patched the hole in the cottage wall where wind whistles through like a ghost choir, mended the seam in your only wool tunic, trapped more rabbits. Too late now. You're in it. You wrap your cloak tighter, wool, scratchy, but blessedly warm, and squint at the sky. Clouds like iron. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell rings, slow and sonorous. A warning? A funeral? Or just a signal for midday mass? Hard to say. No one keeps a perfect schedule when the sun rises late and sets early. Snow clogs the path to the well. You hack at it with a broken hoe, your breath ragged in your throat. The water's half frozen, thick like syrup, and tastes of dirt. You fill a bucket anyway. You don't have the luxury of being picky. That night, the cold deepens like a secret being kept just under your skin. You wrap yourself in every layer you own. 3 tunics, 2 cloaks, a rabbit fur hood that smells like wet dog, and still shiver until your teeth rattle. The fire won't catch. The logs pop and spit, mocking your effort. And then, because the universe loves a good joke, you hear a loud crack from the roof. A beam shifts under the weight of snow. Just what you needed. You drag a stool under it and prop it up with your best guess at carpentry. An old broom handle and a prayer to Saint Joseph, patron of workers. Somewhere outside, a raven croaks, and you remember that old saying, when raven calls at dusk, death walks behind it. You laugh, mostly because the alternative is sobbing. You try not to think about what's coming, weeks, maybe months of this. But it presses in anyway. The idea of a warm spring is just a myth right now. Like unicorns or having enough socks. You stare into the hearth, hoping the embers glow a little brighter. They don't. Still, you lean in, let the warmth tease your cheeks, and breathe slow. One night down, a few dozen to go. Your eyes sting from the smoke before you're even fully awake. The hearth has smoldered all night, and now the air inside your one-room cottage is thick with the heavy, bitter tang of burning peat and soggy wood. You grope around in the gloom, fumbling for the fire poker to shift the stubborn logs. The moment you do, sparks leap toward the low, thatched ceiling like excited insects. You flinch and mutter a very medieval sort of curse, hoping nothing catches. The truth is, your roof is barely a roof. It's a patchwork of straw, turf, and wishful thinking, tied down with twine and weighted with stones. In summer, it's cozy. In winter, it's an accident waiting to happen. You keep a bucket in the corner to catch drips. Today, it's full. You dump it outside where it instantly slushes into slush, the icy water biting your ankles. The thatch sags ominously. You know it needs repair. But climbing onto a snow-slick roof with a bundle of reeds and a prayer isn't exactly a leisurely morning chore. Still, you might not have a choice. The last time it rained and froze, a whole chunk of someone's roof in the next village just collapsed, crushed their bread oven flat. Rumor has it the woman inside survived, but only because her cat jumped on her face just in time. You owe your own cat a treat, if you had any. Inside, you try to rekindle the fire properly, crouched low on the dirt floor, blowing on the embers like they owe you money. You add kindling, dry rushes, a bit of lint, maybe a sliver of last month's tax scrolls. Not like you were going to pay that anyway. It finally catches with a soft woof, and you sit back, victorious, tears running from smoke and relief. You throw on your cloak and step outside to assess the damage. Overnight, snow has drifted up the cottage wall. One of your shutters has fallen off entirely, lying half-buried. You squint at the latch, rotted through. Of course it has. You wedge the board back up with a stick and pack snow against it. It'll hold for now. Maybe. You trudge to the neighboring huts, all listing slightly under winter's weight, and find others already outside, grim-faced, red-nosed, bundled like sad cabbages. One man is muttering to himself while hammering slats across his chimney opening, smoke belching from the sides like a dragon with a bad cold. You exchange nods, the medieval equivalent of, "Can you believe this crap?" Words are expensive in the cold. And no, the chimneys. Most are just holes in the roof or a loose stack of stones, which means the smoke doesn't really go out. It just sort of hugs you. There's no escaping it. Even the goats smell like soot. And you'll carry that scent in your hair, your clothes, and your dreams for months. The hearth is the center of everything. It's your oven, your heater, your single source of light after sundown. You eat by it, sleep near it, and occasionally curse it when it smokes you like a side of ham. Historians still argue whether the average medieval peasant preferred open hearths or chimney stacks. But honestly, you'll take anything that doesn't make your eyes feel like salted onions. Here's a weird one. In some households, it was considered bad luck to let the hearth go out completely. Some families even borrowed fire from neighbors, carrying a burning ember in a clay cup, shielding it from wind like a sacred flame. Because trying to start a new fire from scratch. Let's just say if you've ever rubbed sticks together for fun, imagine doing that when your fingers are frozen and the only dry wood is imaginary. Later that day, you inspect the walls. Wattle and daub doesn't hold heat well. Every crack lets in wind that whistles like a drunk ghost. You've stuffed the gaps with moss and rags. And still, your candle flickers every time a gust sneaks through. You fantasize about glass windows. Fancy, decadent glass. But those are for churches and lords. You've got horn panes if you're lucky, oiled parchment if not. And that's assuming nobody poked a hole through them during last month's chicken incident. As the day darkens, and it will get dark absurdly early, you gather what you can for insulation. Dried reeds, bits of cloth, old cloaks, even sheep dung patties. Yes, you heard that right. Dried animal dung was often used as fuel or insulation. Not exactly the cozy Pinterest cottagecore vibe, but it keeps the frostbite away. Mostly, back inside, your breath still puffs visibly in the air. The fire is alive, but barely. You sit close, knees tucked in, nose nearly in the flames. Someone once said you can tell who's been warming themselves by the hearth because they smell like smoked bacon. You've never smelled bacon, but if it's anything like yourself right now, it must be divine. By bedtime, your eyes are sore from the smoke, your throat scratchy, and your hair crackling with static. You curl under moth-eaten blanket, press your back to your siblings for warmth, and hope no one rolls into the fire pit while sleeping. It's happened. That's why you keep that iron screen up, partly safety, partly peace of mind. You close your eyes, but the cold creeps in anyway, through the floor, the walls, even your dreams. Outside, snow thickens. The wind howls like something ancient and angry. You fall asleep hoping the roof holds. Morning sneaks in like a thief, pale and unforgiving. You pry open crusted eyelids, breathe in a fresh lung full of hearth smoke. Artisanal medieval incense, and roll off the straw mattress with a creak loud enough to scare the mice into silence. Outside, a brittle hush blankets the hamlet. The first task of the day is simple, brutal, and non-negotiable. Claw what food remains from the earth before the earth turns to iron. Your cloak still reeks of peat and panic, but you throw it on anyway and step outside. The air is so cold it feels square-edged, slicing your cheeks. Every breath crystallizes, hanging for a moment like a ghost that's late for an appointment. Yesterday's snow squeaks under your boots as you trudge toward the fields. The long, skinny strips assigned to your family in the great medieval land-sharing game show otherwise known as the open field system. That's your mainstream fact for the day. Most peasants don't own tidy little fence plots. They work scattered strips parceled out in rotations that look suspiciously like someone dropped spaghetti on a map and called it governance. You cross the boundary marker, a sad, tilted post wrapped in last year's shriveled ivy, and prod the ground with a frost-hardened stick. The soil answers with the dull thud of stone. Perfect. You kneel, pull off a mitten, and dig fingertips into the frozen crust. It's like trying to scoop ice cream straight from a noble's banquet table. Technically doable, spiritually soul-crushing. Somewhere behind you, a rooster coughs. He sounds as enthusiastic as you feel. Each yank produces a turnip shaped less like a robust root vegetable and more like a gnarled knuckle from a very angry giant. They are small, crooked, and covered in dirt that refuses to let go. Nature's cling wrap. Still, you cradle them like puppies. Tonight's porridge just got slightly less depressing. Joke number 1. You briefly consider opening a gourmet bistro called Le Depressing Turnip, but the only customer would be existential dread. Your fingernails sting. Blood retreats from extremities like nobles fleeing tax season. You switch tactics, swinging a short hoe to chip away soil in careful wedges, hoping not to slice your precious turnips in half. A neighbor in the next strip overdoes the same. You share a sympathetic glance. No words, because if you start talking, your lips might crack off like pottery shards. Halfway down your allotted row, sunlight finally breaks through ragged clouds in a watery smear. You savor the warmth for a heartbeat before realizing it's mostly psychological. The real sensation is still unloved ice block grasping a mildly insulting vegetable. You pause to flex numb fingers and recall an odd bit of folk wisdom Marta told you. Some farmers swear that singing to root crops helps them slide free. Apparently, turnips respond best to ballads about lost love. Scholars still argue whether that's agricultural technique or just an early form of karaoke therapy, but you hum a shaky tune anyway. Can't hurt. Miraculously, one particularly stubborn root wriggles loose at the chorus. Quirky tidbit achieved. As the pile of produce grows, so does the gnawing thought at the back of your mind. Is it enough? You mentally calculate. 6 scrawny turnips times 5 family members equals maybe 8 bowls of stew if you thin it with plenty of water and optimistic seasoning, i.e. salt and hope. It'll have to stretch. You remind yourself of that time a traveling friar claimed famine builds character. Joke number 2. You considered replying, "Then by spring I'll have more character than the king's jester." But you were too busy fainting from hunger to speak up. You straightened to rest your spine, gaze sweeping across fields that look eerily abandoned, furrows striped with snow like a poorly washed quilt. Out past the hedgerow, frozen berry brambles rattle in the wind, their thorns tink-tink-tinking like tiny bells. In the distance, someone cusses loudly. The wind steals the words before you can determine whether it's a prayer or a profanity mosaic. Historically, medieval winters clamped down on farmland activity except for emergency tasks like this, though plowing might resume briefly if a warm spell softened the topsoil. Right now, the ground is about as flexible as the bishop at the annual ale festival. You glance at your frozen rows of cabbages, standing there like green bowling balls fused to the lane. Then decide today is strictly turnip triage. A sudden gust sends powdery snow swirling into your hood, down your neck, performing a brisk ice water baptism. You sputter and stamp feet, nearly dropping your basket. Third joke lands. You promise the sky you'll write a stern review. 1 star would not winter again. Yet you know you'll be back tomorrow because survival does not accept cancellations. You move faster, scooping up the last few roots, then heft the basket. It feels heavier than expected, but that might just be your arms filing a workplace grievance. You hurry toward home, boots leaving shallow impressions that the wind immediately edits away. Back inside, the hearth welcomes you with a sleepy flicker. You fling the basket onto the table, where a thin film of frost on the wood instantly melts. The aroma of cold dirt fills the room, an oddly comforting perfume when you're half convinced the outside world is plotting your icy demise. You set to scrubbing the turnips in a wooden bowl of tepid water, fingers regaining sensation in agonizing pins and needles. You mutter a grateful prayer to Saint Isidore, patron of farmers, because superstition plus elbow grease equals dinner. Your sister approaches, sees the haul, and raises an eyebrow that speaks volumes. We might make it another week. You both know it's a gamble, but optimism is cheaper than salt. For a moment you pause, thinking of warmer months when the fields burst with color, buzzing life, and the sweet smell of new hay. Memory is a dangerous luxury, too bright, too far away, but you let it warm you for 3 heartbeats before tucking it back into the mental larder. You peel 1 turnip, carve into half moons, and sneak a raw bite. It's peppery, crisp, and aggressively underwhelming. Still you grin. Food is food. You toss the pieces into the iron pot, add water, a crumbled fist of oats, and set it over the fire. The mixture begins its slow, reluctant simmer. Steam curls upward, fogging the air like a cheap inn's bathhouse. You breathe it in, feeling heat and hope coil in your chest. Outside, clouds gather again, plotting their next icy assault. But for now, the door is shut, the turnip stew is bubbling, and you've claimed 1 more small victory against the season. You lean back, letting the hearth's glow paint your eyelids red, and whisper to the pot, "Stay hot, stay thick." Funny how in winter, your most heartfelt prayers are directed at soup. The sun's long gone by the time you've scraped the last turnip scrap from the pot. Night in a medieval winter doesn't fall. It collapses like a sack of flour, sudden and smothering. You light the rushlight, a greasy reed dipped in tallow, and brace yourself for the long hours ahead. The cold outside is a monster, but inside, it's a crowded, itchy, smoky mess, and that's somehow better. You shuffle toward the hearth. Everyone's already gathered. Your siblings, your parents, even your neighbor who just dropped by 3 hours ago and never left. There's a silent, shared rule in winter. If you're near the fire when the temperature drops, you stay. Walls are thin, the wind is thick, and warmth is life. Tonight, the communal hearth is your lifeline. The smoke snakes up and sideways, and, let's be honest, mostly just settles directly into your lungs. Chimneys aren't elegant stoneworks in cottages like yours. They're holes in the ceiling with a strong opinion about efficiency. Your eyes sting, you cough, and someone mutters, "It's clearing, just needs a minute." It won't clear. It never clears. The hearth fire glows dimly, painting the faces around you in soft gold and deep shadow. Everyone sits in a circle, legs tucked beneath wool, elbows nudging one another in that casual medieval version of closeness that means, you're warm, I'm cold. Deal with it. A pot of boiled water steams near the embers. You'll use it to steep dried herbs later. Mint if someone's lucky, nettles if not. For now, it's just a humidity generator, a desperate attempt to battle the dry air that cracks lips and frays tempers. The conversation floats and dips like smoke. Someone's aunt claims she saw a frost spirit, white-faced, long-fingered, standing at the edge of the woods this morning. Your older brother scoffs. That's just Gudrun's scarecrow. But his voice wobbles slightly, like he's not entirely convinced. You, meanwhile, sip thin ale and decide not to mention the dream you had last night. Hoarfrost hands on the windowsill, tapping. There's an odd comfort in the crowd. In winter, solitude is dangerous. People sleep near others, not just for warmth, but for the reassurance that you haven't, stopped breathing. You've heard stories of folks freezing in their sleep. No scream, no sound, just stillness. So yes, your kid brother's elbow is in your rib cage, and your uncle's snoring like a dying bagpipe, but at least you're still warm. Mostly. Quirky tidbit. Bedtime pecking order. The warmest spot is nearest the hearth, and the person who gets it usually isn't the oldest or the most deserving. It's the one who called dibs first or bribes with good gossip. Last week, you earned prime spot rights for recounting the tale of the traveling minstrel who wore boots made of squirrel pelts. Historians still argue whether communal hearth living encouraged stronger family bonds or just chronic passive aggression. You're voting for the latter tonight. Someone just farted, and no one's owning up. A lull settles over the group. You reach for your belt pouch and pull out your personal treasure, a dried apple slice. Chewy, slightly fermented, a little sticky with mystery. You nibble it slowly, eyes half closed. It tastes like autumn. You share a bite with your sister. It's a ritual of sorts, small sweetness, shared because joy is portioned carefully in winter. A storyteller pipes up, an elder with a voice like cracked leather. She starts recounting the tale of the frost giant who tried to steal spring, only to be tricked by a clever pig who wore mittens. You've heard it 100 times, but no one interrupts. Stories are warmth too. They stretch time, soften hunger, and convince you that the dark outside doesn't have teeth. You catch a movement near the door, a flicker. Wind, you tell yourself. Just wind. But your mind is already conjuring images. Snow spirits, wolves walking on two legs, lonely nights with glowing eyes. You pull your cloak tighter and focus on the storyteller's voice. Her words weave a tapestry thicker than any blanket. At one point, your cousin starts playing a bone flute. Poorly. It sounds like a goose dying in slow motion. Someone throws a scrap of cloth at him. He stops, grinning. Mood killer. Your father says, but it's with affection. Kind of. You stifle a yawn. You can't sleep yet. Not until the fire is banked properly. It's your turn tonight. You stir the coals, add a few damp logs, then bury the embers in ash to keep them smoldering till morning. This is an art form. If you mess it up, you'll wake to a cold hearth and even colder apologies. Once that's done, you unroll your bedding. Thin wool layered over straw, itchy blanket on top, someone else's feet beneath. You lie down, knees to chest, sharing body heat like coins. The air smells like wood smoke, onion, and wool socks that gave up last week. Comfort comes in strange packages. Before the rushlight burns out, you glance around. Everyone's eyes are heavy-lidded. Your baby brother's mouth is open. Someone is already snoring. A dog curls in the corner, one ear twitching. Outside, snow taps against the shutters, soft, insistent. You let your mind drift. You think of warmer things. Fresh bread, sun on stone walls, a summer pond thick with frogs. But the images flicker and fade like the last of the rushlight. And even here, surrounded by people, surrounded by heat, the cold still hovers just outside your bones. Waiting. You turn on your side, wrap your arms around yourself, and whisper a quick, clumsy prayer. Not for wealth, not even for warmth, just for one more quiet night. The day begins with the kind of cold that clings to your bones like old guilt. You wake stiff, sore, and cranky. Not that different from yesterday. But today's task isn't the usual root digging or fire tending. No, today you've got to cross the river. And in winter, that's not a commute, it's a gamble. The village needs salt. Again, you got a pouch of last week's barley to trade and vague instructions. Go to Dunstone. Get what you can. Don't fall in. Comforting. You wrap 3 cloaks around your shoulders. Secure your boots with strips of leather that'll last until they don't. And head out before the sun does much more than blink at the horizon. The path is narrow, half covered in snow, and your breath fogs like dragon smoke with every step. The trees lining the trail are dead silent. Branches frozen stiff, icicles clinking like wind chimes made by someone with a flair for the dramatic. In your pouch, the barley shifts with each step, a reminder that this trip had better be worth it. A half hour in, your fingers are already numb, and your nose has lost all sensation. You keep going. The river isn't far, but it's not about distance, it's about nerves. And ice. You reach the edge and pause. The water is frozen, a flat white sheet that reflects the morning light like polished bone. It looks solid, but that means absolutely nothing. You remember last winter, Ulfgar the Cooper went through trying to retrieve a lost duck. A duck of all things. The poor man clung to the bank like a wet rag, while his friends fished him out with a laundry pole. That duck lived a long life, by the way. Ulfgar, he caught something nasty and coughed all spring. You test the edge with a boot. It holds. So far, you step on 1 foot, then the next. It creaks under you, long, low, like the stomach of a dragon that hasn't eaten. You take another step. It creaks again. You stop breathing, and then you hear it, a whistle in the distance. Another traveler. You glance up. A woman approaches from the opposite bank, bundled thick in what looks like every piece of cloth she owns. She waves once, cautiously, and starts across too. Misery, apparently, enjoys parallel company. You walk together in silence, meeting halfway. Neither of you speaks. Why tempt fate? Your feet slide a little, but you manage to keep upright. You pass like ghosts in the mist, offering each other nothing more than mutual survival energy. And maybe that's enough. Fun fact, medieval river crossings in winter weren't just risky. They were sometimes scheduled community events. Groups would go together, carrying ropes and planks to test the ice, and sometimes a local priest would tag along to bless the crossing. Historians still argue whether that was for divine protection or just good PR for the church. No rope, no priest today. Just you and the ghosts of Ulfgar's duck. You make it across. You exhale, so hard hurts. On this side, the snow is deeper, the path less traveled. Dunstone is about a mile further, and you slog toward it with the kind of determination born purely of obligation and salted fish cravings. Your boots squish and crunch, alternating between soggy and frozen solid. Your legs ache, and then, blessed relief, a trail of smoke rises over the ridge. You round a bend and see it, Dunstone, a cluster of cottages, all looking slightly more disappointed than yours. But smoke means warmth, and warmth means people. You head straight for the trading barn. It's low-ceilinged, stuffed with burlap sacks, and smells aggressively of onions and something vaguely rodent-adjacent. A man greets you with a nod and a grunt. You show him your barley. He inspects it with the solemnity of a priest evaluating a sin. After a pause, he grunts again and gestures to a sack. Salt. Coarse, gray, precious. He hands you a half-handful. Fair trade, he mumbles. You want to scream, but your face is frozen, so instead you just nod. Medieval barter is a dance where the music is always off-key. Still, you pocket the salt. Mission technically accomplished. You warm your hands by the barn hearth for a moment. The trader offers you a cup of something hot. Probably nettle broth, possibly regrets. You sip. It burns, but you're grateful. This isn't luxury. It's survival served lukewarm in a chipped wooden cup. You linger a bit, not wanting to go back. But night comes fast, and the river still waits. The return trip is quieter. No travelers, no ghosts, no ducks. The ice groans again, but holds. You make it across faster this time, fueled by the desire to sit near your hearth and pretend your toes are still attached. By the time you reach your village, your cloak is stiff with frozen sweat. You step into your cottage, dump the pouch of salt on the table, and collapse by the fire. No one says thank you. They just start sprinkling it over the stew like it's fairy dust. You're too tired to care. Quirky detail? Some folks believe salt kept evil spirits at bay. Maybe that's why you feel a little better now. Or maybe it's the fire, or the fact that you didn't fall in. You curl up by the hearth, the day still shivering inside your bones, and mutter the closest thing to a medieval mic drop. Still alive. You wake to the sound of bells, not joyful ones, not like the peals that ring out on feast days. No, these are dull, flat, and a little begrudging, like the bell ringer got out of bed reluctantly and is using the clapper to express his mood. It's Charity Day at the Abbey, in a village where the cupboard is mostly theoretical and hope is spread thinner than your best turnip stew. Charity Day is both salvation and a social experiment in patience. You pull yourself up from the straw bedding, brush off a few stray twigs and something that might have been a beetle in another life, and start bundling up. Again, always bundling. Layers on layers until you look like a lumpy candle about to melt. The walk to the Abbey takes half an hour, assuming the snow doesn't get dramatic. Today, it does. You trudge through thigh-deep drifts, each step a negotiation with gravity. The sky is a dull gray, the kind that makes noon feel like dusk and your thoughts a little heavier than usual. A crow watches you from a fence post, tilting its head in judgment. The Abbey comes into view, tall, grim, and cold even in summer. But inside those thick stone walls is food. Sort of. The monks hand out barley porridge on designated days. 1 bowl per person. No refills. No arguments. The queue is already forming as you arrive. A ragged line of peasants bundled in every combination of wool, linen, fur, and faint desperation. You nod to familiar faces. Old Marta is here, wrapped in a shawl that might once have been a curtain. A few children stand barefoot, hopping from foot to foot for warmth. You wonder if they'll get extra. Probably not. The monks are devout, yes, but no one ever said they were generous. Eventually, the gate creaks open. A lay brother steps out, face set to mildly annoyed. He mumbles a short prayer, gestures the line forward, and the march begins. Inside the courtyard, the air shifts, still cold, but now carrying the scent of barley mash and faint incense, like sanctified oatmeal. You're handed a rough wooden bowl, still damp from the last user. You shuffle forward. The monk ladling out gruel has a rhythm. Scoop, plop, no eye contact. When it's your turn, he pauses just long enough to look at your shoes, or maybe your soul, then dollops a steaming blob into the bowl. It's beige, slightly gluey, and smells like humility. You step aside, sit on a frozen bench, and eat slowly. The porridge is hot, and that's enough. You spot someone tearing up from the heat of it, tears steaming in the chill. No one's crying because it's good, just because it isn't snow. Fun fact, monasteries in medieval Europe were often centers of charity, offering food, medical care, and lodging to the poor. But charity wasn't free in spirit. It came with a side of judgment, a sprinkle of sermon, and occasionally a lecture about sin, sloth, or bathing more often. Historians still argue whether abbeys were genuine safety nets or just PR machines for the church. Halfway through your meal, the sermon begins. A rotund friar steps up to a barrel and starts preaching. Something about humility, obedience, the virtue of suffering. You nod along while chewing, though you're mostly thinking about how to barter for more oats at the fair next month. Someone coughs violently behind you. No one flinches. At this point, coughing is background music. You finish your bowl, lick the sides politely, as is tradition, and stand to return it. The monk doesn't meet your eyes when you hand it back. The next person is already in place, bowl ready, hope slightly brighter than yours was. Outside, the snow has eased into a slow, relentless drift. You wrap your cloak tighter and begin the walk home. Your stomach isn't full, but it's quieter than it was this morning. That's something. A few kids run past you, laughing in that high-pitched, shrill way only children can. They are throwing snow at each other with terrifying accuracy. You sidestep a snowball like a seasoned warrior and trudge on. At home, your family greets you with varying degrees of expectation and fatigue. Did they give extra today? Your brother asks. You shake your head. No dried meat, your mother adds. You just raise an eyebrow. She nods, unsurprised. The gruel was never meant to feed. It was meant to stretch survival like a thread pulled taut. But here's your quirky tidbit for the day. Some monks reportedly believed that giving food to the poor counted double if the recipients didn't thank them. That's right. Ungrateful charity recipients were thought to provide extra spiritual credit, which might explain why they never smiled during handouts. They are racking up those heavenly bonus points while you're racking up frostbite. You huddle near the hearth and share your experience with the rest. Everyone nods. No one is jealous. It wasn't a feast, but it wasn't nothing. And in winter, not nothing is actually quite a lot. Later, you wrap a bit of cloth around your feet, stuff them into boots still damp from yesterday, and step outside to gather kindling. Again, the cycle never ends, because in a medieval winter, the real currency isn't gold or salt or even porridge. It's warmth. And today, you've earned just enough to keep going. You hear them before you see them. Low howls, stretched long and mournful, drifting through the tree line like a song the wind refuses to forget. You pause in your chores, breaking up ice from the water trough with a stick that should have been firewood weeks ago, and look toward the darkened edge of the forest. They're out there again. The wolves. It's not your imagination. This isn't the occasional fox rummaging for scraps or village dog gone feral. No, these are proper wolves. Big ones, gray as ash, eyes like dim stars. They've been circling the outskirts for days now, testing the boundaries. Testing you. You tighten your cloak and head back toward the cottage. Inside, you say nothing at first, but your father's already throwing an extra log on the fire. Your sister is rolling a ball of pitch-soaked cloth into a torch. Everyone knows. The wolves are watching tonight. You draw the short straw. Again. Torch duty. Because you're quick on your feet, and your eyesight's decent. And, well, your older brother is sick. Coughing again. And no one's going to risk him in the cold. Not when fevers hit harder than fangs this time of year. You step back outside, torch sputtering to life in your hand, casting flickering amber light that makes every bush look like it's breathing. You follow the path along the fence line, heart thumping slow and loud. The livestock pens are mostly empty. 1 goat, 2 chickens, and a pig with a very punchable face. You keep an eye on them anyway. Wolves don't care if they're scrawny. Meat is meat. Here's your historical fact for the evening. During particularly harsh winters in the Middle Ages, wolves grew bold enough to enter villages, sometimes in packs, drawn by hunger and the scent of livestock or human illness. They weren't fairy tale villains. They were just cold, hungry predators. Much like you, really. Just more teeth. The torchlight doesn't go far. Every tree beyond your immediate circle looks like a secret. You stop occasionally, listening. Snow creaks under your boots. But otherwise, the world is terrifyingly still. Then, a rustle. You freeze. The torch crackles. Something moves just beyond the tree line. You lift the flame higher, breath catching in your throat. 2 eyes shine back at you. Too low to be a deer, too steady to be wind. And then it turns, slinking back into the shadows. You exhale slowly. Not tonight, maybe, but they are still there. Your cousin joins you an hour later, carrying a fresh torch and a very shaky bravado. Anything? He asks. You shake your head, but don't look away from the woods. Quirky tidbit. Some villages would hang bones or old iron tools on trees near their property lines to ward off wolves. Supposedly, it made the animals confused or wary. Historians still argue whether wolves actually feared these talismans, or whether they simply disliked all the clanging and jingling. Either way, your fence is decorated with broken ladles and sheep bones. Can't hurt. After your shift, you step inside. Your cheeks are numb, and your fingers ache. The fire's burned low, but someone stays the coals. The heat hits you like a welcome insult. You sit down on the bench nearest the hearth and peel off your gloves. Blisters. Of course. Your mother presses a warm cloth to your hands and doesn't say anything. She doesn't need to. You all know the truth. The wolves are getting bolder. The livestock pen was dragged at last night. The tracks in the snow were clear, sharp, and fresh. They're coming closer. You eat dinner, thin barley stew again, this time with a suspicious chunk of meat no one's identifying out loud. You don't ask. You don't want to know. Your brother coughs in the corner, a wet, rattling sound. You hand him a cup of hot broth, then retreat to your corner of the hearth. The torch sits by the door, still half-lit, as if it's waiting to be used again. It probably will. Sleep doesn't come easy. Every creak of timber makes you flinch. Every snap in the fire sounds like a pour on snow. And then, yes, another howl. Closer this time. Longer. You sit up, heart racing. No one else stays. Or maybe they're pretending. You listen, straining. Nothing. Just the wind. You lie back down. You stay at the ceiling. You wonder how many more nights you will have to listen before those howls come from your doorstep instead of the forest. And you wonder, not for the first time, if the wolves are actually the ones outside. The tavern's glow leaks onto the snow like honey spilling across a frozen plate. You don't mean to stop here. Not really. But the cold claws deeper than usual tonight, and the lure of body heat, firelight, and very bad singing is too strong to resist. You push the heavy wooden door open and step into a wall of sound and warmth that almost knocks you back out again. Inside, it's chaos in the best possible way. The room is packed, not because people are celebrating anything in particular, but because the ale house is one of the few places in town where you can feel something resembling heat without starting a fire yourself. You're immediately hit with a blast of smells. Smoke, wet wool, pickled onions, and whatever's in that guy's beard. Don't look too closely. But it's familiar, comforting even, like a bad blanket that still keeps you warm. You edge toward the bar, avoiding the elbow jousting and the occasional spilled drink. Someone belts out a verse from a bawdy song about shepherd, a goose, and some scandalous turnip behavior. You try not to listen too hard, but the rhymes are catchy. Very catchy. A few lines later, you're humming along. That's how it starts. A tankard of ale lands in front of you. Lukewarm, sour, probably cut with river water. Still, it warms your fingers and numbs your stomach in all the right ways. You take a long sip. Heaven. Medieval heaven. Anyway, you settle into a spot near the fire pit, squeezed between a carpenter who smells like pitch and a washerwoman with very sharp elbows. The talk here is fast, gossipy, and laced with nervous energy. People swap rumors like currency. Who's lost a chicken? Who saw the wolves last? Who sneezed on Brother Arnold and might have cursed the entire parish? Here's your mainstream historical fact. Medieval taverns weren't just drinking holes. They were social centers, news hubs, makeshift courts, and occasionally places to find a very questionable doctor. In fact, a lot of local decisions got hashed out right here, between sips of ale and hearty slaps on the back. You overhear a man bragging that his wife's onion soup could cure anything short of death. Someone else counters that death might prefer the soup, if only to escape the taste. Laughter erupts. It's not a comedy club, but it's close. You finish your ale and consider another, but coin is tight. You finger the worn piece of silver in your pouch and decide to hold on to it. It's hard enough getting through winter without waking up broke and hungover. One tankard enough to trick your stomach into feeling full. That'll do. A lute player in the corner plucks out a shaky tune, the melody stumbling like a drunk in the dark. Still, people clap along. Someone bangs a spoon on the table. The rhythm is off, the lyrics are obscene, and the mood is perfect. And then a cough. A real one. Wet. Deep. It cuts through the laughter like a dagger. Conversation falters for a moment. Eyes flick toward the source. It's an old man by the door, wrapped in too many scarves. He raises a hand in apology, mutters something, and steps outside. The air shifts. People don't say anything, but you can feel it, the edge creeping in. Because it's not just wolves that stalk the village. It's winter fevers, too. Sickness spreads fast here, especially in rooms like this, warm, close, crowded. The kind of places where breathing is a shared activity. Quirky tidbit. Some people carried sprigs of herbs or dried orange peels to sniff when someone coughed near them. Thought it would keep the bad airs away. Historians still argue whether this was early germ theory or just very fragrant wishful thinking. You glance around. One woman quietly ties a bit of cloth over her nose. Another tightens her shawl. A few people laugh nervously and pretend not to notice. The music resumes, a little louder this time, as if volume can drown out the fear. You linger for another minute, then stand. The warmth has sunk into your bones, and you don't want to leave, but you also don't want to risk waking tomorrow with a fever that cooks you from the inside out. The fire's not worth that. Outside, the cold slaps you like an angry ghost. You pull your cloak tighter and head home, boots crunching against the frozen path. Behind you, the tavern door swings open briefly. Another figure steps out, coughing softly. Then the door shuts again, sealing the warmth and the danger inside. Back home, your cottage is quieter than usual. The fire's low. Your sister snores softly. Your brother is still awake, stirring a pot of watery leek broth. He looks up as you enter. "Anyone dead?" he asks, half joking. "Not yet," you reply, setting your cup on the table and sitting close to the fire. The warmth from the ale lingers, but just barely. Already, the chill is returning. You think of the tavern, of laughter in the face of dread, of jokes hiding coughs, of strangers pressed together for warmth. Winter isn't just weather. It's a pressure. It squeezes the life out of everything that isn't held close and fiercely. You poke the fire. The embers flare, then settle. Tonight, you're safe. For now. By morning, the cottage smells of boiled leeks and something metallic, like rust but softer, sadder. Your brother is still coughing, curled on a pile of rags near the hearth, skin pale and cheeks flushed. You don't need a doctor to tell you what this is. Winter has entered the bloodstream. The whole family moves more slowly now. Not because of the cold, though it still bites with a vengeance, but because every breath feels borrowed. When someone gets sick in winter, everything becomes a negotiation. Between hope and fear, between folklore and what scraps of medicine you can actually afford. You drag a bench near the fire, close enough to watch your brother's chest rise and fall. Still breathing. Still here. You reach into the herbs hanging near the rafters. Dry, crinkly bundles of nettle, yarrow, and mint. You crumble a bit into hot water, make the house smell slightly less like damp sheep, and pretend it's a cure. It's not. Here's your mainstream historical fact for the day. In medieval Europe, illness was blamed on an imbalance of the four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Your brother, by those rules, is apparently too full of phlegm. The solution? Leeches, of course. Or maybe bleeding with a knife. Or, if you're lucky, some warm broth and sleep. You're going with the broth option. The neighbors hear about your brother. Of course they do. In a village this small, secrets are as rare as imported spices. Old Marta brings a cloth pouch tied with red string. "Warding herbs," she says, with an expression halfway between pity and superstition. "Hang it over the door," she adds, "to keep the death fog out." Quirky tidbit. Some believe that winter sickness wasn't just physical, it was spiritual. Evil air, bad omens, even punishment for skipping Massachusetts. That's why Marta's pouch smells like thyme and burnt feathers. You hang it anyway. Better safe than sorry. The air inside gets thicker. The fire never goes out now. You keep it burning day and night, feeding it with twigs, branches, and even a broken stool leg. Sacrifices to keep the fever demons at bay. Meanwhile, your mother crushes dried toad in a bowl. Yes, actual toad. She whispers a prayer under her breath. You pretend not to see. Even she's not sure whether this is medicine or desperation. But in winter, the line blurs. She sprinkles a little of the toad dust under your brother's pillow. He sneezes violently. You decide that's probably a good sign. Outside, the snow keeps falling, heavier now. It muffles everything. The village is quiet, quieter than usual. That eerie kind of quiet where you're not sure if people are staying in because it's too cold or because they're too sick. You go out to fetch water and pass two cottages with their shutters closed tight. No smoke from the chimneys. You don't ask questions. Historically speaking, winter sickness didn't always have a name. Sometimes it was chill fever. Sometimes wasting illness. Sometimes just the lingering. And since no one really knew the cause, treatments ran the gamut. Hot bricks placed under the bed, garlic necklaces, blessed crosses, even burying a dead mouse under the threshold. That last one was supposedly for earaches, but you don't want to test it. You bring back the water, stoke the fire, and settle near your brother again. His breathing is ragged, but steady. You squeeze his hand. It's warm. That's good. You think. Then comes the argument. Should you send for the bone setter? She's not a real healer, just someone who learned things from someone else who once lived near a monastery. But she charges in salted pork, not coin, and you've got enough for maybe half a slab. Your father shrugs. We wait. So you wait. That night, your brother talks in his sleep. Half-formed words, names, snatches of songs. You hold a damp cloth to his forehead and hum the tune he's trying to remember. It's an old song from a harvest festival 2 years ago. You were both healthier then. The song makes your throat ache. He quiets. You whisper, stay. It's the only command you think might actually matter. Outside, wolves howl again. You're not afraid of them tonight. They're far away. The real fear is quieter. It lives in the chest, in the silence between coughs, in the feeling that someone's spirit might just slip. In the morning, he's still alive. Pale, exhausted, soaked in sweat, but alive. You tear into the last crust of bread and drop it into his broth. The broth is thin, practically just salted water with ambition, but it tastes like triumph. He manages a smile. Barely. You give him a spoon and step outside. You don't go far, just enough to breathe air that isn't steeped in steam and smoke and sickness. You let the wind slap your face, sharp and bracing, and you whisper thanks to anything that might be listening. Saints, spirits, the ghost of that toad. Back inside, your mother is sweeping the hearth, mumbling to herself. Your sister is humming. Your brother is sleeping, breathing evenly now. The fever has passed. Not forever, but for now. And in a medieval winter, for now, is sometimes the best you get. The cottage is quieter today. Not because it's warmer. Oh no, winter still grips the world like a miser's hand on a coin purse. But because something is in the air. A hush, a hum, a little spark of anticipation. You've counted the days by scratch marks on the lintel, and sure enough, it's here. Yuletide. Well, the Christian version of it, technically. Feast of the Nativity. But the locals still whisper the old word. Yule, because deep down, everyone knows this isn't just about saints or sermons. It's about surviving long enough to celebrate anything at all. You wake early, not because you want to, but because excitement still stirs in your chest like it did when you were smaller, when you believed the dead walked on Yule Eve and animals spoke Latin at midnight. Maybe they still do. Maybe you just haven't been listening closely enough. You slip on your stiff boots and trudge outside to help your father fetch the Yule log. Not just any log, mind you. It's got to be thick, heavy, and preferably infested with the right kind of beetles to bring luck, or maybe just protein if it comes to that. You heave it onto a sled and drag it back, both of you panting like war horses. The Yule log must burn all night, tradition says, or the coming year will bring death or drought, or worse, another cousin moving into your already overstuffed cottage. Historians still argue whether the Yule log comes from Norse pagan rites or just bored people looking for an excuse to light something huge on fire. Inside, the hearth is cleared, the ashes swept, well, pushed aside, and the log is placed with all the solemnity of a royal coronation. You light it. It catches. It crackles. Everyone exhales like they've been holding their breath since Michaelmas. Soon, the room smells like burning pine and singed hair. Because of course someone leaned too close. Again, and then comes the food. Don't get too excited, it's still winter. There's no roast goose or platters of sugar plums here. But for once, the table has more than porridge. There's a slab of salted pork, thin but visible, 2 round loaves of coarse bread, a pot of dried apple stew sweetened with the last spoon of honey, and in the center, a glistening triangle of actual animal fat. Yes, fat. It's the only part of the boar your cousin managed to trade for after a long journey and even longer bartering session that involved 3 onions and a riddle contest. You try not to ask questions, but you do savor the smell. It fills the air like hope. Everyone gets a piece, thin as a coin and just as valuable. You chew yours slowly, carefully, reverently. It melts across your tongue with a richness so divine, you swear you hear a choir. Joke of the night. You briefly consider opening a pop-up restaurant called the Fat Slice, but you'd run out of ingredients before you finish the sign. After the feast, the real tradition begins. Games. Some are just excuses to make noise, like Snap Apple, which involve hanging fruit from string and trying to bite it without using your hands. Your cousin loses a tooth. Everyone claps. Others are riddles. You gather near the hearth and pass a jug of thin ale while each person takes a turn. I go in hard, come out soft, and I never speak. What am I? It's a candle, but your brother says snowshoe, and no one corrects him. The ale is working. You tell a riddle of your own. I am born in fire, but feared in flood. I never walk, but follow your foot. Someone guesses sin. Someone else guesses chamber pot. The answer is warmth, but you give the point to the chamber pot answer anyway, because that's honestly fair. Quirky tidbit. In some places, people believe that on Yuletide night, all animals knelt in their stalls at midnight to honor the birth of Christ. Supposedly, they even spoke human words. Scholars still argue whether this was symbolic storytelling or just farmers spending too much time in the cold with livestock. Either way, you peek into the pen at midnight. The pig does not look impressed. As the evening winds down, someone produces a bit of beeswax and carves a candle stub for the table. The light dances on the walls, mixing with the firelight. Your little sister starts singing a carol. Half the words are mumbled, and the tune wanders like a lost monk, but no one stops her. It's soft and strange and perfect. You sit back, full in a way that's more about firelight and togetherness than food. For a few hours, winter doesn't win. The cottage is warm, the bellies are content, and even your brother's cough seems quieter. Outside, the snow falls with polite gentleness. Not a storm. Not tonight. Just soft flakes, like feathers shaken from an angel's mattress. You pull your cloak tighter around your shoulders and smile. It won't last, this peace. But you've made it this far. And that, in winter, is a feast of its own. The merriment of Yuletide fades faster than you'd like. One morning you wake to find the fat slab a distant memory, the laughter packed away like summer shoes, and your ration pile looking like it went through a very enthusiastic raccoon. But of course, you don't have raccoons here, just very persistent mice. You tie your belt a little tighter and head for the larder. Larder is a generous word. It's really just a pit in the ground, lined with straw, covered with a wooden lid weighed down with rocks, and possibly cursed. You clear the snow off and open it, bracing yourself for disappointment. Inside, it's exactly what you feared, a dwindling kingdom of desperation. There's a jar of sour cabbage, a sack of oats that smells vaguely like mildew, a few shriveled apples that have developed personalities, and, joy of joys, a bundle of smoked herring that looks like it could slap you back if you stayed too long. It's enough for a few meals if you stretch it thin and pretend flavor isn't necessary for survival. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Medieval families preserved food by salting, drying, pickling, or storing it in cellars and ice pits. Fresh meat didn't last long in the cold unless it was frozen solid, and even then, frost could mangle it. So winter diets leaned heavily on grains, preserved fish, root vegetables, and, well, fermented creativity. You fish out a turnip with a forked bottom that looks uncomfortably like the face of someone you owe money to and place it on the chopping block. You also retrieve the herring, trying not to gag from the briny punch to the nose. Herring is the duct tape of medieval cuisine, binding everything together, if not pleasantly. You bring the supplies inside and begin the ritual of rationing. Everyone gets a small bowl of oat gruel, flavor it with turnip shavings, one sliver of herring, and, if you're lucky, a scrap of dried apple. You sprinkle in salt like it's magic dust, because it is. Joke for the day, you pretend to serve your concoction like a tavern chef. Your finest bowl of oat root fish mush, madam. Your sister claps politely. Your brother moans, possibly from either amusement or scurvy. The real trouble comes at night. You hear the scratching first. Little claws, tiny squeaks. The unmistakable sound of mice conducting a midnight heist. You sit up, heart pounding, grab a broom, and tiptoe to the larder. Sure enough, the oat sack has a hole chewed right through it. The little beasts are clever and determined, like very small, fur-covered tax collectors. You scare them off, patch the hole with some cloth, and sprinkle ash around the perimeter to try to mask the smell of food. Marta once told you that dried mint confuses mice. You sprinkle some too, though it may just confuse you. Either way, you go back to bed feeling like you survived a siege. Here's a quirky detail. Some folks use cats, obviously, but in lean winters, people sometimes ate the cats. So the mice came back with a vengeance. There are stories, perhaps exaggerated, of rodent armies taking over entire barns, forcing families to move out for a season. Historians still argue whether those tales are metaphors or just deeply embarrassing truths. By morning, you notice someone has moved a jar of sour cabbage. Your mother, most likely. She serves it that night with oatcakes made from leftover mash. The taste? Tart. Confused. Slightly alarming. But it's warm, and your stomach doesn't argue. You find yourself getting creative. You boil bone from the summer pig until the broth turns cloudy. Then add herbs, a pinch of flour, and voila, bone soup. It's almost flavor. Almost. The days blend together. You invent a stew that's just bread crust boiled with apple peel. You call it apple surprise. The surprise is that it's technically edible. Joke number 2. You consider writing a cookbook titled 50 Shades of Beige, a medieval culinary journey. But the real challenge is storage. With temperatures dipping and rising unpredictably, sometimes the pit freezes everything solid. Other times, it thaws just enough to turn your herring into mush. You find one apple frozen so hard you can use it to hammer a nail. You do. It works. You also try fermenting cabbage in a clay pot. It bubbles ominously. Smells worse. Your father swears it's turning into something nutritious. You suspect it's turning into a sentient entity. Still, no one throws it out. You rotate supplies. You hide one dried sausage under a floorboard, just in case someone gets grabby. You start measuring food like you're counting coins. Half a cup of oats here, 1/5 of a turnip there. Hunger makes you good at fractions. Every meal becomes an event. A planning session. A negotiation. You invent games around it. Who can spot the most weevil-free oat grain? Who can make the herring sliver last longest without chewing? It's dark humor, but it helps. And all the while, the mice keep coming. You set traps with bits of stale bread and pray for results. One night, success, 3 mice in a row. You don't eat them, yet, but you do hold them up like trophies. You are the lord of the larder now, for at least one night. Eventually, you discover that old trick of hanging food in bags from the ceiling beams. Out of reach, mostly, except for the one ambitious mouse who figures it out and swings like a tiny, grain-addicted pirate. You applaud before chasing it off. At the end of another long day, you lie in bed, stomach rumbling, and whisper your final joke aloud to the ceiling. If anyone up there's listening, I'll trade one toe for a fresh loaf of bread. Left foot. Deal. No lightning strike. No divine muffin. But tomorrow, you'll do it all again. Because surviving winter isn't about feasting. It's about making crumbs feel like a banquet. A word count. 1055. It starts with a clinking, metal on metal, echoing through the frosted morning stillness. Not the rhythmic clang of a blacksmith or the slapdash rattle of a tinker's cart. No, this is deliberate. Heavy. Boots on ice. Spurs on stone. Trouble on horseback. You peer out the cottage's oilcloth window just in time to see 2 figures dismount near the village square. Their cloaks are thick, fur-lined. Their boots gleam under the crusted snow. And their eyes. You don't even need to see them. You already know. Tax collectors. You rush to the hearth. Your mother is already stuffing a pouch beneath the floorboards. Your father whispers something that sounds like lie about the goats. Your sister, very helpfully, is pretending to be asleep. You nudge her with your elbow. Wake up. It's the crown's turn to rob us. They always come in winter. Not out of cruelty. Okay, a little out of cruelty. But mostly because this is when villagers are least able to fight back. You're too hungry, too tired, too focused on keeping your children and chickens alive. And the crown? It's always hungry. You step outside, joining the rest of the villagers shuffling toward the square. Eyes low, hands out, pouches light. The collectors wait beside their horses, which snort and stamp in the cold. their breath pluming like miniature dragons. The taller one, clearly the senior, unrolls a parchment and begins to speak. By order of His Majesty the King, you tune out the opening lines. It's the same as last year. Taxation due. Coin preferred. Goods accepted. Complaints not. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Medieval taxes weren't just annual. Many villages paid several times a year. Tithes to the church, rents to the lord, levies to the crown, and random fees for things like using the mill, crossing a bridge, or even owning a chimney. And yes, chimney tax was very real. You reach into your pouch. One coin, a silver penny, bent at the edge, smudged from too much finger worrying. It's not enough. You know it. Everyone does. But you step forward anyway. The collector doesn't even look up, just holds out his gloved hand. You drop the coin in. It makes the saddest little chink you've ever heard. He raises an eyebrow. Anything else? You manage a strained smile. One hen, very fat, very devoted to prayer. He does not smile. You don't have a fat hen. You don't even have a medium hen. What you do have is a scrawny, mean-tempered creature with one eye and a limp. You named her Sister Benedicta, partly out of spite, partly out of hope. You offer her up with both hands and a whispered apology. The collector inspects her. Sister Benedicta pecks him. He grunts, shoves her into a sack, and waves you off. Next, you scurry back into the crowd. Behind you, the second collector is already marking down names, weights, and unpaid balances in neat columns. You hear your neighbor arguing, something about having already paid, or maybe promising a piglet come spring. The collector nods, then confiscates his boots. Quirky tidbit. In hard winters, some tax collectors accepted bizarre forms of payment, like sacks of lice for supposed medical uses, or bundles of dried frog skin. Don't ask. Historians still argue whether this was practical governance or just some collector with very strange hobbies. Back in your cottage, the mood is grim. Sister Benedicta's absence is noted, and your little sister sulks in the corner. She was the only one who liked my singing, she mutters. Your father shrugs. The king needs prayerful poultry. You laugh just a little, because if you don't, something inside might crack. Later that day, the collectors come door to door for additional inspections. You hide the good firewood, tuck the small cheese wheel behind a loose stone, and toss a blanket over the better boots. You're not the only one. A sort of village-wide scavenger hunt kicks into action. People bury dried beans in the compost heap, hide cured meats in empty beehives, even shove salt under sleeping children. They come to your door, knock once, hard. You open, trying to look poor but not dead, just pitiful enough to make further collection feel redundant. They enter without a word. One pokes at the hearth. Any hidden coin? You spread your arms. If there was, I'd have eaten it. The other lifts the lid on your food pit. Sniffs. Makes a face. What is that? You smile sweetly. Apple cabbage mash. Would you like a bowl? They leave after 15 minutes, grumbling. You exhale. Victory? Technically. But they'll be back. Maybe next week. Maybe sooner. Royal hunger has no calendar. Once they are gone, you retrieve the cheese, the beans, and your father's boots. You count what's left. It's not much, but it's still yours. For now. You pass a few villages on your way to the well later. One's missing his gloves. Another's shirt looks conspicuously newer than before, likely swapped with a worse one to throw off the inspectors. There's a quiet camaraderie in shared survival. A nod here, a muttered joke there. Joke of the day. You tell Marta, I offered them my soul, but they said it wasn't properly salted. She snorts so hard her bonnet slips. Back home, the fire crackles low. You sit beside it, arms wrapped around your knees, and listen to the wind outside. Winter isn't just weather. It's negotiation. It's hiding, bartering, bluffing, surviving. And taxes. Taxes are the wolves you can't outlast. You just have to outsmart them. Or outstink them. Whichever works. It begins with a smell. Not fire. Not food. Not even that strange, permanent sock funk that clings to your boots no matter how long you leave them outside. No, this is different. Damp earth, stale rot, something sour lurking under it all. You wrinkle your nose, step to the door, and crack it open. The snow is melting. At first, you can't believe it. But sure enough, there's a sheen on the road. The white crust has begun to sink, patchy and wet, revealing the winter's detritus beneath. Twigs, ruts, muddy straw, and something that may have once been a hat. The snow isn't drifting anymore. It's weeping. Then you hear it, dripping. From the eaves, from the fence posts, even from the forest trees. Water. It should be hopeful. It's not. You grab your boots and step outside. And suddenly, your foot vanishes. 1 second it's walking. The next, it's plunged ankle deep into slush masquerading as solid ground. You lurch forward, fling your arms out, and land with a graceless splat. Cold water soaks your tunic. Your dignity? That was last seen floating downstream. Welcome to the thaw. Inside the village, everyone's moving like hungover bees. There's excitement, yes, but it's laced with dread. Because thaw doesn't mean spring. It means mud. It means collapse. It means things buried under snow, now emerging like poorly timed surprises. Your father's cart axle is already half submerged in the front yard. Your neighbor's privy pit is leaking. Someone screams as a roof tile gives way and drops into a waterlogged stew pot. Winter was cruel, but the thaw is personal. Mainstream fact time. Medieval villages often suffered more damage during the thaw than during midwinter. Sudden melting caused flooding, structural collapse, and loss of food stores, especially those hidden in pits and cellars. And roads? Forget it. They turn to rivers. You and your sister grab buckets and start bailing out the corner of the cottage where water's seeped under the wall. The rushes are soaked. The straw mattress squelches when you sit on it. You try to laugh. You fail. Quirky tidbit, in some places, people held little thaw rituals, clapping, singing, or banging pots to wake the land and chase away the rot spirits. Historians still argue whether this was genuine belief or just a community-wide excuse to yell about the mud. Either way, your sister starts smacking a spoon on a pot. "Go away, rot ghost," she shouts. It doesn't help, but it's cathartic. The real issue comes mid-afternoon. You notice it while walking to the well. At first, it's just a trickle across the road. Then it's a puddle. Then it's a stream. And then the lane, your lovely, if usually frozen, village lane, is a full-blown river. You blink. You turn to fetch help. And by the time you're back, it's reached your cottage doorstep. Inside, the fire is sputtering. The hearth is damp. The dog won't stop whining. And the bread you were hoping to dry out near the embers is now soggy enough to qualify as porridge. You race to lift everything you can. Sacks of grain, bundles of kindling, your family's only dry blanket. Furniture is too heavy to move. You prop it on bricks. The pig, who has thus far refused to respect you as an authority figure, chooses this moment to leap onto your father's sleeping cot. Honestly, you respect her hustle. The village bell rings, a rare, ominous sound. You wait outside. Water sloshes past your knees. Chickens paddle by on a broken crate. Your friend Wulfric is floating a child's doll like a tiny boat and singing a sea shanty. You both lock eyes. No words, just mutual suffering. The parish priest shouts something from a dry patch near the church. Higher ground. Bring your stores. People begin forming a chain, buckets, baskets, anything that will float. You join in, hauling a soggy sack of oats on your shoulder like it's royal treasure. You slip twice. You laugh once, high and unhinged. Historical truth. Many medieval cottages had packed dirt floors. When floodwater entered, it didn't just make things wet. It turned homes into swampy pits. Mold set in. Straw beds rotted. Even stone hearths cracked. Entire sections of villages could become unlivable, at least until everything dried out. By dusk, the water has receded a little, but everything is soaked. The firewood is damp. The bread is lost. The pig has developed a taste for blankets. And the cottage? Well, you tell yourself it looks earthy. Joke of the day. You declare yourself baron of the houseboat. Then try to paddle a stool across the flooded lane. It tips. Your sister laughs so hard she wheezes. You regroup that night in the church hall, one of the few buildings high enough to stay dry. Blankets are shared. Wet boots are lined by the fire like tiny, miserable boats. People tell stories, not cheerful ones, but real ones. Remember when the goat got stuck in the chimney? Remember last thaw, when the flour sacks floated into the neighbor's yard and he pretended they were his? Someone hands you a cup of something warm. Might be tea, might be soup, doesn't matter. You sip it slowly, feeling the heat seep into your chest. Outside, the moonlight reflects on pools of meltwater. The snow is almost gone now, but it's left chaos in its wake. Nothing is dry, nothing is easy, but you're here. You didn't float away. You still have your family. You still have your pig, regrettably. And tomorrow, you'll patch the roof. You'll dry the bed. You'll start again. Because surviving a medieval winter doesn't end when the snow melts. It just changes form. The village smells like wet wool and optimism. Okay, cautious optimism. The thaw has stopped turning everything into a swamp. The snow has retreated to the north-facing edges of roofs and hedgerows, and there's this absurd little chirp in the air. Yes, an actual bird. A real, live bird, singing like it owns the place. You forgot they made that sound. Spring isn't here yet, but it's tapping on the shutters like a friendly tax collector, which is to say suspiciously cheerful and probably about to take something from you. Still, it's enough to shake people awake. The entire hamlet comes alive with a kind of slow, muddy energy. You step outside to find your neighbor ankle-deep in slush, sharpening his plowshare like he's preparing for battle, which in a way he is. The soil's softening. The fields call. But before that happens, there's a rite of passage, one that's waited patiently behind the frost, the spring fair. It's not for another week, but everyone's already buzzing about it. After months of surviving on sour cabbage and hope, the promise of a market, fresh goods, actual choices, the chance to barter instead of beg, is enough to get people excited about cleaning things. Your family assigns tasks. You're in charge of shearing the sheep, which would be easier if the sheep wanted to be sheared. They don't. You corner one of the fluffier ones, armed with a pair of clippers and a handful of oats, and proceed to negotiate. It does not go well. An hour later, you're covered in wool, sweat, and the growing suspicion that sheep understand sarcasm. But you manage to wrestle the fleece into a sack. It's coarse, uneven. It might be more mud than wool, but it's something to trade. Meanwhile, your sister's sorting through the cottage's extras. Baskets, buttons, woven cords, 2 dolls made from dried apple faces and corn husks. They're a little terrifying, but someone might want them, or use them to scare off crows. Your father's reshaping old nails and hinges into assorted useful things, which basically means a lot of vaguely sharp metal objects that can be sold as tools, traps, or possibly musical instruments. Here's your historical fact. Medieval fairs were vital hubs of trade, news, and social life. Many were chartered events, held at specific times with royal or ecclesiastical permission. People would travel for miles, bringing whatever they had, spun wool, preserved food, animals, or handmade trinkets, in hopes of trading for tools, salt, spices, or that most mystical of objects, fresh bread. You gather your goods into bundles, tie them with fraying rope, and make a mental list of things you hope to find. Decent boots, maybe some herbs for your brother's cough, and if fortune really smiles, a wedge of cheese that doesn't smell like medieval revenge. You practice your bartering lines by the fire that night. 3 buttons for a bundle of rosemary. No, this spindle is not haunted. It just hums sometimes. Your sister critiques your delivery. Less desperate, more mysterious. There's also the social element. People from nearby villages will be there. Some you know, some you only hear about in stories that may or may not involve goats and questionable marriages. You brush your tunic with a bit of charcoal to darken the stains. It helps. Slightly. Quirky tidbit. Some villagers believe that the way a person traded at the spring fair foretold their luck for the whole year. Drive a hard bargain? You'll have a strong harvest. Get swindled by a peddler in a red cap? Expect mildew and a plague of beetles. Historians still argue whether this was actual folk belief or just a very convenient excuse for bad decision-making. The week passes in a blur of preparation. Tools are sharpened, cloaks mended, stories rehearsed. Even the livestock gets brushed, well rinsed. Sort of. Your cousin tries to train his goose to follow commands so he can sell it as enchanted. The goose bites everyone equally, so technically it works. You start practicing your fair voice, just loud enough to draw attention, just friendly enough not to get pelted with turnips. Wool for sale, sheep scented and winter certified. Your little brother chimes in, buy now, or the goats get it. You're not sure what that means, but the rhythm's solid. On the morning of the fair, you wake before the rooster. The sky is pink and gold. The frost has receded to the edges of the path, and the air smells like promise. Well, that and wet earth. And pig. You load the cart, check your bundles twice, and set out with the others. The road to the fair is rutted, still soggy from the thaw, but you don't mind. There are people on the path ahead and behind, laughing, bickering, carrying crates on their backs, or dragging sledges behind stubborn donkeys. It's like a parade of exhaustion, joy, and homemade goods. You trade greetings. One man's offering fermented honey root in tiny clay jugs. Another has wooden spoons, carved into suspiciously familiar faces. A woman walks past with a goose on a leash. You nod politely. Joke of the day. You tell your sister, if we don't sell this wool, I'm going to wear it myself and declare myself Lord of Itch. She replies, that's already your title. When the fairgrounds come into view, you stop for a moment just to take it in. Tents and carts at the hillside. Smoke curls from cook fires. Voices rise in a messy, beautiful crescendo. It smells like spice, like wood smoke, like life. You step forward. Spring may not be here yet. Not fully. But it's on its way. And you've got something to trade. The first green shoots poke through the slush like shy guests at a feast. At first, you think they're a trick, just bits of last year's grass, or maybe winter weeds trying one last scam. But no, these are different. Thicker, brighter, determined. Spring has arrived. Officially. You kneel by the edge of the field, dirt still cold and damp beneath your knees, and gently prod the fresh growth with your fingertips. Real, living green. It smells faintly of pepper and possibility. You exhale slowly, almost afraid to believe it. But there it is, proof that the earth, for all its months of frostbitten silence, remembers how to wake up. The thaw hasn't cleaned everything. The cottage still leaks. Your boots are still more whole than leather. The food pit looks like something died in it, possibly ambition. But that one little green stem, it's enough to begin again. Your father starts marking rows in the garden, dragging a wooden marker through the mud. Your mother's already soaking seeds, muttering about planting them on the right moon, which, to be honest, seems a little vague, but no one dares question her. Your sister plucks nettles from the hedgerow and comes back with a wild grin and 3 bee stings. You admire her dedication. You spend the morning fixing the fence again. The pig has decided she prefers sleeping outdoors and will, apparently, headbutt any barrier in her way. She's a menace, but also, somehow, the village's mascot now. A badge of resilience. You check the root cellar. Nothing remains but the memory of turnips and a few confused weevils. You make a note. Next year, more cabbage. Maybe fewer oats. Definitely a better mouse plan. Possibly a cat. Possibly 2 cats, just to be safe. Your brother, thinner but smiling, sits outside in the pale sun, whittling sticks into strange shapes. He says they're charms for luck. You pretend not to notice that one looks suspiciously like the tax collector. You admire the detail in the scowl. Mainstream fact time. In many medieval villages, the arrival of spring didn't mean rest. It meant urgency. The soil needed turning. Tools had to be sharpened. Crops had to be planted before the next frost or sudden rain. Every day was a gamble. Every hour a calculation. You sharpen your hoe on a river stone and try not to think about the last time it broke mid-swing. Your cousin helps you repair the shaft with a bit of twine and a barrow nail. If it doesn't last, he says, at least it'll break dramatically. Quirky tidbit. Some villagers mark the first day of spring by baking green bread. Flat loaves mixed with nettles, wild garlic, or dandelion leaves. Not exactly bakery quality, but after months of pickled things, your tongue rejoices. You and your sister gather the ingredients and give a go. The final result is chewy, slightly bitter, strongly green, but weirdly good. You eat it while sitting in the sun, back against the cottage wall, steam rising from the damp soil all around. The air is still cool, but soft now with hints of warmth. Not summer warmth, just enough to make you hopeful. Later that day, you visit Marta. She's already set her chickens loose, and they're strutting around like they survived winter on sheer arrogance. She gives you a bundle of dried herbs and says, "For the next illness." You smile and take them. That's her way of saying she's glad you made it. The village feels lighter. Laughter returns, awkwardly at first, like someone trying to remember a forgotten song. Children kick mud at each other. Someone finds a frog and insists it's a prince in hiding. You join the joke. Maybe the frog laughs too. As the evening falls, you gather by the fire. Not for warmth, not really. Just because it's a habit. Your family talks more now. Plans, hopes, crops, weddings, repairs. It's still survival, but the grip of winter has loosened its bony fingers. Your mother tells you that you've changed. You laugh. Taller. She shakes her head. Quieter. Sharper. You listen more. She's not wrong, because now you know what it costs to live through a medieval winter. You felt the hunger, dodged the wolves, traded laughter for dried fish. You fought for warmth, ration crumbs, and counted the hours between coughs. And you made it, just as spring breathes its first gentle breath across the land. So do you. You pull in the scent of damp earth and promise and breathe out something softer. Something like peace. You walk the field before bed, checking the fences one last time, letting the stars blink down from a clear, calm sky. The ground squelches underfoot, but it's alive. Not frozen. Not buried. You pause, hand resting on a fence post, and look out over the land. Scarred, muddy, exhausted, but still here. Just like you. And you whisper into the night. Next winter, I'll be ready. Wind down, 300 words. Now, let your shoulders loosen. Feel the fire's gentle warmth fading into the quiet. The room is still. The night outside softer now. No wolves, no wind. Just the hush of sleeping land and the faint creak of old wood settling. Picture the fields you've just walked. The ones slowly waking beneath the thaw, dappled with puddles and those fragile green threads of life pushing upward. You've been through the hardest season a person can know. Cold that bites the bone, hunger that stretches the days, darkness that swallows entire afternoons. And yet you endured. Imagine your fingers brushing against fresh leaves, your boots sinking into warming soil, your face lifted toward a pale spring sun. The chill is still in the air, but it doesn't threaten anymore. It only lingers. There's a calm in knowing you've survived something ancient, something countless souls before you have weathered in quiet courage. You've done it too, through smoke-thick hearths, ice-bound roads, and nights when even dreams seemed brittle with frost. So now, allow yourself to rest. Your hearth is glowing low. The house is still. The last candle flickers once, then steadies. Your breath slows, your eyes close, and all that remains is the soft sound of the wind rustling new leaves outside your window. Sleep well, traveler. Tomorrow is spring.